Hello, Room 9 first graders. Mr. Stowe is back to read you another book today. I hope you're all doing well, taking care of each other. And I hope you enjoyed yesterday's book. Yo, yes. I've got another favorite today of mine. A favorite of mine when I was a kid, and a favorite of mine to read to you as your teacher. It's called The Big Orange Splot by Daniel Pinkwater. Great book, one of my favorites. He's the author and the illustrator, just like us. So here we go, The Big Orange Splot. And both my sons also enjoyed this book a lot when they were kids. We read this one many times. The Big Orange Splot. Mr. Plumbean lived on a street where all the houses were the same. There's Mr. Plumbean. He liked it that way. So did everybody else on Mr. Plumbean's street. This is a neat street, they would say. Then, one day, ... A seagull flew over Mr. Plumbean's house. He was carrying a can of bright orange paint. No one knows why. And he dropped the can. No one knows why. Right over Mr. Plumbean's house. Let's scooch over here a little bit. There we go. It made a big... That's my dog, Hal. It made a big orange splot on Mr. Plumbean's house. Ooh, too bad, everyone said. Mr. Plumbean will have to paint his house again. I suppose I will, said Mr. Plumbean. But he didn't paint his house right away. He looked at the big orange splot for a long time. There it is. Then he went about his business. The neighbors got tired of seeing that big orange splot. Someone said, Mr. Plumbean, we wish you'd get around to painting your house. Okay, said Mr. Plumbean. What do you think's going to happen? He got some blue paint and some white paint, and that night he got busy. He painted at night because it was cooler. When the paint was gone, the roof was blue, the walls were white, and the big orange splot was still there. Then he got some more paint. He got red paint, yellow paint, green paint, and purple paint. In the morning, the other people on the street came out of their houses. Their houses were all the same, but Mr. Plumbean's house was like a rainbow. It was like a jungle. It was like an explosion. So there he is painting. There he is painting at night because it's cooler. And there's his house. Does it still look like everyone else's house? Nope. Looks like an explosion. There was the big orange splot. And there were little orange splots. There were stripes. There were pictures of elephants and lions and girls and steam shovels. The people said, Plumbean has popped his cork, flipped his wig, blown his stack, and dropped his stopper. They went away muttering. That day, Mr. Plumbean bought carpenter's tools. You know what a carpenter is? That's a builder. That night, he built a tower on top of his roof, and he painted a clock on the tower. So here's a close-up. You can see the elephants and the steam shovels like a big tractor there. Lions and girls and dots and splots. And then there's the clock tower. The next day, the people said, Plumbean has gushed his mush. He's lost his marbles. They decided they would pretend not to notice. There's another word for that, ignore. They ignored him. That very night, Mr. Plumbean got a truck full of green things. He planted palm trees, baobabs, thorn bushes, onions, and frangipani. In the morning, he bought a hammock and an alligator. Here's his truck all full of stuff after going to Home Depot. When the other people came out of their houses, they saw Mr. Plumbean swinging in a hammock between two palm trees. they saw an alligator lying in the grass. Mr. Plumbean was drinking lemonade. Can you see him in his hammock there with the alligator? He's looking pretty happy. Plumbean has gone too far. This used to be a neat street. Plumbean, what have you done to your house? The people shouted. My house is me, and I am it. My house is where I like to be, and it looks like all my dreams, Mr. Plumbean said. The people went away. They asked the man who lived next door to Mr. Plumbean to go have a talk with him. Tell him that we all liked it here before he changed his house. Tell him that his house has to be the same as ours so we can have a neat street. What do you think about that? The neighbor went to see Mr. Plumbean that evening. They sat under the palm trees, drinking lemonade and talking all night long. Look at the alligator. They sleep. There they are. Think he'll talk him back to putting his house back the other way? Early the next morning, the man went out to get lumber and rope and nails and paint. Uh-oh. When the people came out of their houses, they saw a red and yellow ship next door to the house of Mr. Plumbean. Look at that. What have you done to your house? They shouted at the man. My house is me and I am it. My house is where I like to be. And it looks like all my dreams, said the man, who had always loved ships. He's just like Plumbean, the people said. He's got bees in his bonnet, bats in his belfry, knots in his noodle. Then one by one, they went to see Mr. Plumbean late at night. They would sit under the palm trees and drink lemonade and talk about their dreams. And whenever anybody visited Mr. Plumbean's house the very next day, that person would set about changing his or her own house to fit their dreams. There's the man who loves ships. How would you like to live in that? Ready to see some houses that look like people's dreams? Oh, two more. Whenever a stranger came to the street of Mr. Plumbean and his neighbors, the stranger would say, "This is not a neat street." And then all the people would say, "Our street is us and we are it. Our street is where we like to be. And it looks like all our dreams." There's some houses. The ship's a little lost, but you can see all the rest. You probably have a favorite house in that book. Maybe you like the ship. Maybe you like the castle. This one looks like a Greek monument with its columns. Maybe the candy-looking house. So they decided to build the houses that they liked. What do you think about that? Do you think that's important? I do. Maybe you could design, which means think up and plan, make a design for a house that you would like. Maybe that looks like your dreams. And you could maybe you could even write it about it. But you could send me a picture of that on Remind if you come up with a good plan for a house, like Mr. Plumbean did. So I hope you enjoyed that book. I hope you're doing okay and taking care of each other and your families at home. And I'll check in tomorrow with another read aloud. I've got a few books here. Most of my books are at school, so I borrowed a few from my good friend Joe and looked around in Sam and John's room to find some old books. I have a few, so I'll keep reading aloud and so I can see every day. But you can send me some photos of the houses that you draw and design that you like. So take care of each other, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.